The brain, an endless resource whose limits still remain undiscovered. Even a minor defect in this structure of perfect design would cause significant changes in our lives. Modern scientific research is bringing us even closer to the functions and mysteries of this miraculous organ. In our daily lives, we find ourselves in the midst of thousands of tastes and smells that add immeasurable color to our lives. Just think of an overflowing bouquet of flowers, the fresh scent of reborn soil after a spring rain, the fragrance of the people we love. The unique tastes of all the different foods we enjoy. Now, let's think for just a moment, what it'd be like if these tastes and smells were no more. If they didn't exist. Even thinking for a split second of being deprived of them is enough to appreciate what tremendous blessings these tastes and smells are for us. Who offers us these blessings is God, the creator of all living things. A passage in the Quran says it like so. If you tried to number God's blessings, you could never count them. God is ever forgiving, most merciful. Despite the overflowing variety of tastes and smells, we're able to perceive them easily since God created these blessings along with the systems allowing us to appreciate them. These systems work flawlessly throughout our lifetimes. This film is intended to make you better understand the awesome power and knowledge of God through a closer look at these perfect systems. God explains His flawless creation as follows in the Quran. He is God, the Creator, the Maker, the giver of form. To him belong the most beautiful names. Everything in the heavens and earth glorifies him. He is the Almighty, the All-Wise. Now, let's examine the taste of smell and see for ourselves its unique design. What we call smell is composed of chemical particles called molecules which evaporate from objects. For instance, what we perceive as the scent of freshly ground coffee is actually molecules from the coffee itself flying through the air. Now, the intensity of the smell is directly proportional with the intensity of evaporation. A just-baked cake fresh out of the oven gives out a much richer scent than a stale one. This is because the cake's molecules are flying very freely through the air due to its oven-baked heat, and molecules can cover a very large area when they are released. Although many molecules have a smell, water does not, and this characteristic is a great blessing for us, for it prevents many problems. For instance, a dry rose and a rose with water drops on it smell exactly the same. What distinguishes various smells from each other are differences in their structures. These differences are so delicate that through the change of a single carbon atom, a pleasant smell might be turned into a repulsive one. The smells of different foods are the result of a particular order of bonds between atoms that form the smell molecules. Each molecule is planned to perform a task. Of course, this excellent design was created by God. But how do we smell, and how do we recognize smells? Now let's find answers to these questions. Every time we breathe, the gaseous mixture of trillions of molecules we call air floods into our nostrils. Also contained within this air mix are microscopic smell molecules. Some of the air that enters our noses is channeled into the olfactory receptors by turbinate bones. It's in this way that the smell molecules reach the olfactory receptors at the top part of the nose. The receptors in this area in turn send the information they get from these molecules to the brain, and the brain's smell center gathers messages from various smell receptors and assesses this information at lightning speed. This leads to the sensation which we perceive as smell. Briefly, the nose works like a chemical analysis laboratory. It is so sensitive that it can recognize up to 10,000 separate odors. What's quite interesting is the breathtaking speed of all these processes. The time between the coffee molecules entering our nostrils and our recognizing their smell is far less than a second. This flawless system obviously cannot be the result of a series of coincidences, as the evolutionists would have us believe. Like all the other systems of the human body, the sense of smell is also an extremely complex design. This is God's art of creation. In our day, ongoing research is being conducted into the sense of smell. Every new insight into this sense serves to reveal just how superb this complex system is. Now let's examine more closely the various parts of the system. The nasal cavity that detects smell is just beneath the eyes and is lined with a sticky mucus fluid. This mucous membrane measures just 1/600th of a millimeter thick, which is ideal. If this membrane were thicker, we would have a weaker sense of smell. But if it were thinner, it would have weakened our immune system, and our tiny nasal hairs would have left open to damage and destruction. Smelling starts at the mucous membrane. The smell molecules have to pass through this membrane in order to meet with the receptors in the nasal hairs, and there are binding proteins made just for this purpose. These proteins in the mucous membrane unite with the smell molecules and serve as their guide. This order is both striking and at the same time constitutes evidence of an amazing creation. Specialized olfactory nerve cells are another part of the smelling system. The basic task of these cells is to take messages from smell molecules and take them to the olfactory bulbs. A smell cell is formed by three main parts: the cell's body in the middle, and then on one end, tiny hairs called cilia, and on the other, nerve extensions called axons. The odor molecules first interact with the receptors on the hair-like cilia of our olfactory membrane. Each olfactory neuron is topped by between 10 and 30 cilia, which range in length from about 1/10 of a millimeter to 1/15. The cilia work using an extraordinary communication mechanism. The odor molecules that melt in the mucus meet with the special receptors in the cilia. This meeting is as sensitive and unique as a lock and a key. During this meeting, a signal is given in the olfactory receptor cell. These cells transform the messages in the olfactory molecules into electrical signals. At this point, astonishing things happen at the axons on the other end of the smell cell. The axons, whose number ranges between 10 and 100, work together in order to transport the signal in the cell to the olfactory bulb inside the brain. They do this by forming a bundle in order to reach the olfactory bulb, and as a group pass through a porous, paper-thin piece of bone called the cribriform plate. It would be no exaggeration to call the special design of the cribriform plate a miracle. This bone has pores in it which allow the passage of the olfactory neurons. Had the bone not been designed in just this way, it would have been impossible for the nerves to connect to each other, and so would have made smelling utterly impossible, even if all the other pieces of the system were right in place. By virtue of this perfect planning behind all the details of our smell system, communication in the smell cells goes off without any hitches. The olfactory bulb is another important part of the olfactory or smell system. The olfactory bulb lies on the front side of the brain on top of the nasal cavity, concealed upon the brain case. There are 2 olfactory lobes in the brain, just as the nose has 2 nasal cavities. Each of these lobes is about as big as a pea. The olfactory lobes work like a newsroom at a TV station or newspaper. All the signals coming in from the olfactory receptors first gather in this center. Millions of pieces of information are reorganized here. Later, they are sent to the related spots in the brain through smell nerves in order to be reassessed. In other words, this tiny organ constantly sorts through and coordinates millions of different smell cells. This perfect system is obviously an extraordinary piece of work. Its design shows God's art of creation. Anyone seeking the origin of such an excellent design in a mere chain of coincidences would be running a fool's errand. In the Quran, God explains how a wise person would respond to such people. Do you then disbelieve in Him who created you from dust, then from a drop of sperm, and then formed you as a man? He is, however, God, my Lord, and I will not associate anyone with my Lord. When someone says the word nose, we all naturally think of the sense of smell. However, studies have shown that actually only 5% of our noses are used towards picking up smells. The remaining 95% perform 2 very important jobs of the respiratory system. The first of these tasks is to warm up and moisten the air which we take in every second. The mucus layer that covers the inside of the nose humidifies the air by giving out water vapor. The capillaries right under this mucus layer help to warm the air running through this passage. This way, the air becomes suitable for our sensitive lungs. This mechanism works like a very advanced air conditioning system that regulates the temperature and humidity of the air. The second task of the nose is to act as a gatekeeper against microbes and dust particles carried by the air which we breathe in. These potentially harmful particles get caught by the mucus layer and then the hair-like cilia. Then the mucus laden with harmful substances is pushed by the cilia to the pharynx. Later, it is expelled from the body by coughing or else swallowed and then destroyed by acids in the stomach. The mucus layer, mucus-producing cells, and cilia work like a personal chemical purification power plant built right into our noses. You can clearly see that these systems in our noses are an example of unparalleled engineering, and yet further evidence of God's perfect creation. God explains His power of creation like this in the Quran. Everything in the heavens and earth belongs to Him. Everything is obedient to Him, the originator of the heavens and earth. When He decides on something, He just says to it, "Be," and it is. When we first walk into a restaurant, we're quick to recognize the scents of the various dishes from the plates around us and the kitchen alike. But after just a while, we stop consciously noticing or smelling these fragrances. This happens because of a mechanism called adaptation. By virtue of this system, smells that we smell all the time don't intrude on us or disturb us, and conversely, we can recognize new and different smells more easily. Smell memory is another miraculous aspect of the smelling process. Every smell we've ever perceived is stored in an archive in our brains using a special coding system. Then, whenever we pick up another smell, our brain analyzes it and checks it against the archive. If the smell is new to us, and so not present in our memory, then we try to interpret it by comparing it to other, more familiar smells. Interestingly, olfactory information is much more enduring in our brains than visual or auditory information. Catching a whiff of a particular smell often triggers a host of interrelated memories. All animals are equipped with whichever smelling system is most suitable for their particular habitat. A dog's sense of smell is estimated to be 1 million times more efficient than humans. Using their noses, dogs can easily smell the faintest odor in the air, and so they're able to do things that humans and machines can't. They can sniff out traces of drugs, smuggled goods, criminals, missing persons, or even people in life-threatening situations due to natural disasters. The salmon is another animal for which the sense of smell is of truly vital importance. Baby salmon emerge from their eggs in rivers towards the end of the winter. After hatching, they spend a few years in these rivers and then migrate to the ocean. But there's much more to their travel than this, as salmon that reach their reproductive age make another amazing trip. At puberty, the salmon irresistibly return to the place where they themselves hatched from their eggs, their spawning grounds. But this time, they go there as parents to lay their own eggs. Now, the fish has no set of navigating tools to help them tell the way on this long, difficult voyage, but still they manage to find their home waters with ease. Moreover, whenever faced by a choice of river branches, they unerringly choose just the path that will take them back to where they were born. But how can they perform such an impressive feat? It's all because they are equipped with a superb sense of smell that helps them to find direction. In short, the salmon's sense of smell helps this fish much like an expert guide along its journey, which can stretch for thousands of kilometers. In the Quran, God also draws attention to the example of the mosquito. Female mosquitoes need blood in order to produce eggs, and the she-fly finds sources of this necessary blood by smelling the air. Female mosquitoes have such a strong sense of smell that they can easily detect human body chemicals from whole kilometers away. In the following verse of the Quran, God states that mosquitoes are evidence for creation, evidence which we should meditate upon. God is not ashamed to make an example of a mosquito or of an even smaller thing. As for those who believe, they know it is the truth from their Lord. But as for those who disbelieve, they say, "What does God mean by this example?" He misguides many by it and guides many by it, but he only misguides the deviators. A good number of electrical devices have been produced in our day as preventative measures against dangers such as fire and gas leaks. The human nose's smelling mechanism was taken as a model in the design of these devices. Fire detectors are one such example of these devices. When they detect smoke in the air, these detectors give off an alarm. The special receptor of the detector looks much like the olfactory receptors in our noses, with one difference. The system in the biological smell receptors is much more complex than the mechanical one in the fire detector. People have also manufactured an electronic nose by taking inspiration from the human olfactory system. Developing this model based on the excellent design of their own noses, they call this device an electronic nose. Electronic noses are used in a number of economic sectors, including food and perfume, and the medical and chemical industries. These high-tech advances notwithstanding, scientists are quick to assert that such clever devices are no match or even competition for our God-given noses. The olfactory system is more testimony for God's superior artistry in creation, who has endless compassion and affection for His servants. This is one of His many blessings for all living creatures. Humans need to eat and drink just to survive, but owing to our sense of taste, this obligation becomes a pleasure. Taste happens through a miraculous system. This system analyzes proteins, ions, complex molecules, and scores of chemical compounds. Our bodies decide what food they have need of through the sense of taste. Let's now examine more closely this extraordinary system, and how it is evidence for creation. There are many thousands of different kinds of food. Still, we can easily distinguish between different tastes due to our sharp sense of taste. The secret to this lies in the organization literally on the tips of our tongues. Every piece of food we eat is formed by many different molecules, and our tongue analyzes the complex chemical structures of these molecules with the skill of a vast, powerful laboratory. So what kind of a design is hidden in our skillful tongues? There are many nerve fibers in our tongues, and this design allows the tongue to freely move in every direction. Our tongue performs an important task when we speak, chew, or swallow food. The food we put in our mouths gets soft and moist with the secretion of the salivary glands. Later, it is pushed to the pharynx. During this phase, the taste receptor cells in the tongue are continuously at work. The taste receptor cells are located only in particular areas of the tongue and mouth. The taste cells in the tongue gather together in a structure that looks like a tiny onion, which we call the taste bud. These taste buds are embedded between bumps called papillae on the tongue. They are located on the top of the tongue as well as its two sides. The tongue has about 10,000 of these taste buds. These figures are quite important for demonstrating the balance present in creation. For if we had fewer taste buds, we would have had no sense of taste, or a very weak one. If, on the other hand, we had more than 10,000, then foods would have tasted either too salty or too sweet. Briefly, all cells exist in their ideal number. Another extraordinary thing is that all these cells are located in just the right place. If they were located elsewhere, let's say on the bottom of the tongue instead of its tops and sides, then we would have tasted much less than what we're actually able to. All these details of taste cells remind people of one fundamental truth. God has created everything in a special and perfect order. Research has shown that there are 5 distinct principal tastes, namely the familiar sweet, salty, hot, sour, and pungent. Pungent is a taste that's found in glutamate, meat, fish, and beans. Studies have also revealed that the old taste map theory is actually wrong. The latest scientific research shows that taste cells react to more than one stimuli, thus demonstrating that these cells have a more complex communication system than we once thought. The communications methods in receptor cells show yet again that these cells are a product of creation. Our brains consist of an average of 100 billion nerve cells, and whenever we drink or eat something, the 3 taste nerves transport the messages they take from taste cells to the related nerves in the brain. In other words, the nerves of the human body work better than the postal system of any modern developed country. At any given moment, a great deal of information is transferred straight to the proper destination, with no information lost in the process. So, how is this mass of messages transformed to mean, say, a delicious slice of cake? We don't yet have the answer to that question. However, we do know that each new discovery is showing us how the taste system is much more complex than we had ever thought. And this shows us God's art of creation. God has blessed us with a dazzling cornucopia of plants, fruits, and vegetables. God reminds us of this fact in the Quran. It is He who sends down water from the sky, from which we bring forth growth of every kind. And from that we bring forth the green shoots, and from them we bring forth close-packed seeds. And from the spades of the date palm, date clusters hanging down, and gardens of grapes and olives and pomegranates, both similar and dissimilar. Look at their fruits as they bear fruit and ripen. There are signs in that for people who believe. The striking structure of the sense of taste has served to inspire many a scientist. Devices imitating the function of the human tongue have been developed, such as an electronic tongue. This invention helps us to distinguish between fresh and stale food and to detect the spoilage that occurs in food due to bacterial growth. On this artificial tongue, the electronic circuit has 100 tiny holes, each of them designed to look like a taste bud. But when compared to the human tongue, this artificial tongue is a very primitive instrument for tasting. Our tongues are incomparably better than an electric tongue, and this just shows how great a blessing tasting is. It is unreasonable to search for an explanation for the origin of this system in any method other than creation. In this film, we've looked at the senses of smell and taste, two very important blessings for all humans. We've seen that these complex mechanisms constitute solid evidence for creation. Just like everything else in the universe, God created these mechanisms, and we should always remember that humans have but a single responsibility towards God. That is, to express their sincere gratitude towards Him. In the Quran, God calls out to those who disregard this truth. Say, who provides for you out of heaven and earth? Who controls hearing and sight? Who brings forth the living from the dead and the dead from the living? Who directs the whole affair? They will say, God. Say, so will you not then do your duty? That is God, your Lord, the truth. And what is there after truth except misguidance? So how have you been distracted?